Ah, hi, everyone. Welcome to Future of Space, Spaceports, NASA, and Astronaut Training. My name is Mason. I'm up here in Unst, Shetland. As you can tell from my accent, I'm originally not from here, but I come from the United States, Oklahoma more specifically. And if you don't know where that is, find Texas, go right above, and we're just that nice hat on top of Texas. Been in Scotland about 12 years now, and happy to take you on this little journey of Saxavoro Spaceport. We can talk about NASA. I've done some stuff. I'm currently working on a side project with the Artemis launch, which they're going to be rolling back the spacecraft starting tomorrow. No, Friday. And also, I work in astronaut training, and I'm currently writing a manual on helping kids get to space and what that means. So welcome, everyone. Let's get started here. There we go. All right, Saxford Spaceport. So again, Mason, Doc Robbins, fun story about my nickname Doc, or my call sign. I actually picked that up when I was 15, going to space camp way back in 2001. Actually, still can wear my old flight suit, which is something that some of my peers make fun of me all the time, but really, let's not tell them that they're just jealous. But yeah, Doc, and it's funny because my middle initial is D, and they're like, well, danger can't work, so let's call you Doc. And then all these years later, I have a PhD, so I guess that is fitting. So yeah, Saxford Spaceport, UK spaceport. We joke that we're the spaceport above all others, and that's purely because you can't go any further north of us in the UK. So technically speaking, we are above all others. So where are we going today? So I'll give you a little bit about who I am, why space in Shetland. Let's look at the orbits and missions that we're doing, some ground station data, what we do, and then we'll just bring it all together and have fun. So the image that you see in front of you was a satellite image of our site. That's Lambiness Peninsula. That's literally just like a 10-minute walk that way. No, probably 30 minutes. But anyway, potato. So that's Lambiness Peninsula. And if you start off to my right over here at the very tip there, that's our pad 3 that we're building out that's under construction. Well, under strip and record right now. Haven't started quite the construction phase yet. And then as you're moving towards the middle there, that's where your pad 2 and pad 1 are going to be. Move a little bit more off to the left and you see a little bit more brown stuff. That's where all the tracking stuff and the localized launch facilities will be. Then move on over to the far left, and then bigger areas are going to be storage areas and kind of the entrance to the site. So that's what it looks like. We got lucky and found a day when there was very little cloud cover. I've got my window closed right now, but we also have another one of those days, which is crazy because it's been raining nonstop the last few days, but that's part of Shetland. So who am I? Why I do education? This is kind of fun. So my background's in science, technology, innovation studies, and we'll get a little bit more into that a little bit later about what to study, what to do if you want to work in space, what space means. But I'll give you a little idea of my background, and then we can definitely ask questions later and discuss and everything and have some fun with it. So I come from an innovation hub background. I grew up loving space. I have a certification in astrophysics. Stars, moon, things, we all wanted to go there. But I also came from that generation that we had the shuttle program, but you had to be a professional, like military person to get into NASA, to go to space. But now that's all changing, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the opportunities to get to space are so much greater than they were before. But where I tried to work, and I saw that as this new space is emerging, is I've always tried to balance my academic studies with being in industry. And then now I'm back in industry. So my first jobs were working in football, or for me, soccer, but working in professional football, and things changed and whatnot. I had an opportunity to go back to space, so I'm here. So what I'm trying to say is there's no right or wrong path to get to space or to work in space if you really want to do that. And then I put on here, So I actually play for the Scottish national lacrosse team, been a captain at a couple competitions, international competitions. And so My colleagues like to joke that I'm just a mediocre athlete. And then I also like to say that I'm owned by a husky because the dog here is the boss, and what she says goes. So she's got blue eyes. It was sunny, and she just loves her doggles. So anyway, the why question: why do I do this? Why am I here? Why are we talking? Why are we having this shared time right now? And I really like to say that I'm here to inspire the future STEAM leaders in Shetland, UK, and beyond. Where we're lucky, and I'm really lucky, what I do here at Saxavoro is it's a lot of engagements with highlands and islands and rural communities. I've even been working now with Native American populations in the United States around like New Mexico, the Pueblo communities, of just giving that opportunity, because tomorrow's jobs are in space. And basically, if you can dream it, you can do it type of mentality, that no matter where you want to be or what you want to do, there's that opportunity. So that's why I do what I do. And I love that you all invited me here to talk today. So why space? Well, our mission here, or my mission with education, is I want to let you know that you have permission right now. I don't care if you're 6 years old, 9 years old, 14 years old, 34 years old, 67 years old. You have the permission to live, work, and play in space, because space should be about for all. And it's about bringing that opportunity together as we go to the moon, as we go to Mars, as we have these permanent opportunities. Space should be for all. Space is for everyone. I mean, just like imagine it. And then, like I mentioned, tomorrow's jobs are in space. Here in Unst, it's a lot of crofters or farmers, depending on where you're from. It's people working the salmon fisheries. It's people who are working in facilities. It's people that are fixing cars and all of these different things. But look, when we go to the moon, we're going to need farmers. We're going to need crofters. We're going to need mechanics. We're going to need plumbers. We're going to need electricians. We're going to need artists. I mean, I love to say that the best part about being at a spaceport in Shetland is our Viking heritage. So we like to say that this is from the longship to the starship, and that's where we're at. And so if you think of all those opportunities, and then the tradition and the history and all that goes together, it's bringing that now diversity of space, that quantum thinking, that ideas can change. And what I like to ask, like say we were in person, I'm sad that we are not together today. What does space mean to you? Why is space important? And you know, a lot of kids say, well, it's above, it's the stars, it's the moon. I've always wanted to go, but I never thought I could, or these opportunities. You can. Right now, if you're sitting out there and you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, even 12 years old, and you want to go to space, you're probably going to be the generation that sets foot on Mars first, if you want it. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, in the same sense too, it's like, it took 450,000 people to put 3 humans on the moon in 1969. So if you look at, that's 450,000 people working together on one certain thing, one issue, to put 3 people on the moon. So there's all these other opportunities there. But if you want to be the one on the moon, there's that opportunity too, especially as we have like SpaceX is looking at putting 100 people in space and 100 tons of cargo through their Starship at one time. We've had about 675 people go to space so far. That's just over, that's what, 7 Starships with Elon Musk will more than double the amount of people who've gone to space. Starship launches. So those opportunities are there. So I like to say, when it's asked why space, I say, why not? So think about it. But how do you get there? And so the keys to success that I like to say, and I'm going to read the slide, even though I really, you can read it. How? Well, success in space is you got to do what you love. You have to do with whom you love and help others. As my good friend Mike Mongo always says, and he's the one who taught me this, is if you miss one of those things, it's a strike. And once you have a strike, then you get another, and then it all falls apart. But if you're constantly with what you're doing, you do what you love, you do it with whom you love, and you help others in the process to get there, and we make it about a collective to get there. I mean, going back, it's 450,000 for Apollo. It's over 1 million people that are working on Artemis, including myself, to get that first mission off the ground. And eventually we'll have the first person of color, the first minority, and some of these, the first woman who gets to walk on a foreign body within the next 5 years. Exciting, if you couldn't tell that I'm really happy about this. So why Shetland? Well, Shetland space in Scotland, space in Shetland. It's about location, location, location. If you've heard me talk about this before, I always like to say it's like that opportunity that you never know where you're at. Again, here's a map of that earlier satellite image, kind of showing you the different pads that we're looking at. There's an artist rendition of what it's going to look like when we finally get there, touch wood, in the next few months. But then we're also taking the advantages of, and I'll get back to this when we talk a little bit about satellites, is traditionally you'd think when launching, the closer to the equator, you launch east, you use the rotation of the Earth, you use velocity, we're going around, boom, in space, less fuel. Well, you can get the same advantages the further north and south you go. So being at almost 61 degrees north up here in Unst, about the same as Kodiak Island over in Alaska, about the same in the south as the New Zealand spaceport. We have those advantages that as you shoot over the top of the pole and come back down, you can use gravity to pull you that way. So it's less fuel and it's a straight shot. And then these put in to sun synchronous orbits. You're going around the sun, you're following it around as it goes around, or it's polar orbits, just the same, but the light changes the rotation. And these kind of things make an advantage of where we are and where the northern and southern spaceports are. Also, believe it or not, more satellites are actually made in the Glasgow area than anywhere else in the world except for Southern California. So Scotland's already doing space, and then more data is processed in Edinburgh than almost anywhere in the world outside the United States. So Scotland's space industry is a very vibrant industry from both sides of the spectrum here. So you have the building, you have the processing, we're the middle, we're building the spaceport. And I also don't like to look at, I have competitors on here. I don't look at the other spaceports that might be closer to where you live today as competition, but I see that there's so much opportunity here in space in putting satellites, whether it's for environmental, it's for data, it's for telecommunications. There's plenty of opportunity here. I'm excited that Cornwall is launching soon because that's blazing a trail for the rest of us to get there. And those are kind of those advantages there. So yeah, so what do we do? Day in the life of a spaceport. This is my favorite slide because it has no text, but I get to talk about it. So as you can see from the very top right, that is looking out my office window, and you can see there's no trees. It's really flat-ish, and it's funny because don't hate me teachers, but I like to joke that I live on the edge of the flat earth because there's literally nothing north of me. And if you want to debate it, I like to say that pizzas are round too, so come at me. But in all seriousness, because we are so remote, it allows much more opportunity for more frequent launch cadences, which means number of times you can launch, more different operators working. Those kind of opportunities are there just because of the remoteness. Now you might ask, you're so remote, how do you get stuff there? Well, it's cool because we're bringing the Balta Sound Airport back online, so we'll be able to land aircraft, supply aircrafts, but also the Balta Sound port is a deep water port, so we can ship stuff in. So we can bring resources straight into the island. So though it seems like it's remote, it's actually pretty well connected, being that we're actually closer to Norway than we are to mainland Scotland. We're on that divide between the Atlantic and the North Sea, and those kind of opportunities. So kind of going around the other thing. So the middle picture here is when we did a rocket, our first ever test series. It was Operation Freya. We ended up just doing a wet rehearsal, which what that means is you do everything all the way into including fueling, you just don't launch. So we did the whole procedures, a lot of great learning off of that. Interestingly enough, our launch director on the day picked up COVID on the ferry ride up, so he had to do this remotely, but that provided us an opportunity to look at how you bring in people to do these kind of decision-making processes remotely and how it can work within the operation and still stay on task. Because if you didn't know, space is hard, and space constantly wants to beat you, defeat you, push you over. So if you can come up with these challenges almost for yourself, or if they organically come up, you can overcome them, you can solve for almost anything. Or like, again, like my friend Mike Mongo, astronaut Mike Mongo, likes to say, solve for space, solve for Earth. Pretty much every kind of challenge you can find on Earth, if you can solve it for an issue involving space, you'll be able to solve it for Earth. So that's actually him in the cameras when we did Space Camp. there on the far right. Below is when we first broke ground for our strip and record, and because of our heritage with the Nordic and the Viking culture, that was the local Apelia squad that came out with kids from the local school. That's my dog in her high vis vest, so when she goes out to site with me, she wears PPE high vis. On clear nights, we get northern lights all the time, and then of course art and kids art, and we do competitions all the time. The kid who won this one, we actually had a competition to design for the Shetland Space Center before we switched to Saxavoro, and they won a trip to Kennedy Space Center, and we did some fun activations and some stuff with that. So what it comes down to is, though I'm in charge of education, skills, crewed space flight type stuff, our roles could be anything, any day. And that's really what space is you got to be willing to be flexible. You got to be willing to try different things. Just yesterday, I was rewiring a building for internet and finishing off leads and hooking the system up and stuff like that. I mean, I went to school for science and technology. I knew nothing about that 6 months ago. And now if you need internet, I'm your guy. But you have to be that versatile and agile to do stuff. And you got to be willing to put in that little bit of extra, willing to do something that might be out of your comfort zone. But at the end of the day, we're a team, we're working together. It takes everyone for a common goal to get to where we're going. So not just a launch site. Again, kind of rehashing, but going back into it, it's that geographical location. As you can see from the globe that I have up here, when I was talking about how far north and south you do, launching east, you can take advantage of that 1,650 kilometers an hour rotation. Likewise, we don't have this quick rotation when we get further north, but we can use the gravitational pull going north and south. And then that provides that kind of awareness, that provides those opportunities. More than half of what we do here is pulling data. So we have ground station networks. So a lot of it is looking at data storage, data mining, tracking, facilities. If you love, again, art, we're going to start having an artist in residence program here. I mean, if you love, you name it, there's opportunities. I mean, even in the talks with doing some vertical farming opportunities to look at how we can make places like Shetland have more availability of fresh produce, but then what is it like to grow food in space, and use those lessons to help basically bring fresh fruit and veg to the local community. And then a spaceport is cool because it's an entry point, it's a talking point. So for us, the launch site is a catalyst for something greater. So whether that is, again, like the rural community opportunities and bringing more people into space and giving more people opportunity and thinking that there's stuff to do here, upskilling and reskilling, or if that's reaching out to like Mission Saturn in a program that I'm working on that unfortunately I can't quite talk about yet, but it's really exciting. But it involves astronaut training for 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, where you get to go through some of the same processes as what astronauts do, zero-G training, going into dive tanks, those kind of things, wilderness survival, all of that. We've got the space, we're looking, we're having those opportunities. But at the end of the day, and it's really interesting because we're working towards being net zero along with everyone else. Because we're so remote, we can't always rely on the grid and the power here to keep us going all the time. So we've really actually had to build in green ground station opportunities and green energy opportunities purely because of where we're located. But it's that double sword. Instead of trying to do this huge project of bringing in power lines, why don't we just make everything solar and wind and tidal and all those kind of things from the get-go instead of trying to rebuild it in? So it's about being that good corporate social responsibility, sustainability, all those aspects. So I'm conscious of the time, but really quickly, I'll just give you a little overview of the ground station side of it. Like I said, that's over half the business. But yeah, we'll quickly touch on this, and if you have any questions, we can come back to it later. But I wanted to give you just kind of an idea of why Scotland and Shetland, well, really particularly Scotland, is so important to space, and we don't think about that. And from location again, these couple maps are showing you latency, data latency, which what that translates to is time delay, so signal delay of satellite communications to a ground receiver. And as you can see with the dark blue, there's almost no latency for all of Africa, most of Australia, pretty much all of Europe. So that means from Scotland, if you receive data, you can pretty much be able to talk to a satellite in live time for giving lifetime images across the Sahara, lifetime images of Eastern Australia, those kind of things, or even eventually telecommunications opportunities. So that's what Scotland has to give back to the world, I guess it is, as being a global citizen within this new space economy. On the left side is the kind of bubble, and that shows like one satellite receiver. That's kind of the area that as a satellite passes through that it can talk. And there's a few of these around, but that gives kind of an idea there. But also, if you think how fast these pass, it's passing into that bubble quite frequently. So that's why Scotland as a whole is such a great location for space, and why we're seeing so much space investment here right now. Again, those are the orbits. The middle picture is looking at that sun synchronous, the polar orbits, as opposed to the geo. The orange one that goes around is like what you would see like with a launch at NASA or ESA's facility that they do out of South America, whereas we're looking at the over the top, or whichever way it ends up going. And then on the far right, that's showing the launch site here and showing how our trajectories are going between Iceland, Greenland, and Norway. So that's the other opportunity that comes with this site is you look at when you launch a rocket, it comes down to weight of payload versus weight of fuel. And the less fuel you need to get the payload higher, the more payload you can take. So if you have a straight shot, you don't have to do a dog leg, which is basically a course correction going up, which every time you do that when you're launching a rocket adds more fuel. So there's the opportunity. And then, of course, on the far left is just a picture of a satellite. The satellites that we're launching here and that are being built here in Scotland are no bigger than just a coffee cup. And it's funny because I made sure that this was empty, because twice in the last 6 months, I've talked about nanosats and CubeSats, nanosatellites, small cube satellites. They're like 1 by 1. And then I picked up my coffee cup off my desk and I went like this and I actually poured it all over my lap. So lesson learned, fool someone once, fool someone twice. If this is the third time, I'm retiring and you'll have to find someone else to do this. So try to make sure that coffee cup is empty. So yeah, that's about the size of a lot of these satellites that are being made. So we're getting it up to space, it's doing its orbits, it's taking its pictures, it's talking back to us. So anyway, in summary, and I'm going to bring it all together. At the bottom there is my email and my social media handles. So you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or something like that. So if you have any questions after this, more than happy to talk to your classes, be involved. Love talking space nonstop. But I want to leave you with this new space. Where we are in space now is a fast moving train. We're going in warp speed here. And if you think it was 111 years since the Wright brothers took to the air to now, we're now looking at going back to the moon. We're doing all these things, and the average person can go to space. Where can we be in the next 5 years, the next 10 years? How is it going? That new space economy has arrived, that new opportunity. I had the pleasure of talking with Bill Nelson about 2 months ago. He's the administrator of NASA, so the big person in charge of all of NASA. And I asked him, so you're doing like Artemis to the moon, you've got SpaceX doing the heavy Starship that's going to go to the moon and Mars. Well, what does it matter with Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic and some of these smaller commercial companies that are taking people to low Earth orbit, LEO, which is just above the Kármán line, which the Kármán line is about 100 kilometers. It's seen as the division between space and Earth atmosphere. And you're sending all these civilians, all these normal people to that line. Does that matter? Should we be doing that? And he said, look, it's those kind of projects, and it's people like us, you and me, and the future generation that are looking at being able to go above the Kármán line and get to experience that fuels the inspiration and the passion and the drive to go to Mars and beyond. And so we need both aspects to advance as a society, and they both feed off of each other. So we don't look at it as competition, we look at it as a way of collectively going together. And so I thought that was a really cool way to look at, here's NASA, the gold standard of space, saying, look, we're a community, we're working together. Let's not fight, but let's figure out how we can solve for some of these issues we have down here. So those are those dynamic opportunities in the new space, but also that the multiple lines of effort. So it's not just education, it's not just skills, it's not just employment, but it's all of it coming together as a team. Like I said, you don't have to be an astrophysicist. You don't have to be the smartest kid in your class. All you have to do is find something that you love and do it with your heart, and think about how you can impact others and work with others. And if you do those things and you work together, you'll be able to go to space, go to the moon, go beyond, if that's what you want to do. And if you don't, it's okay too. But yeah, I guess in conclusion, I hope you got a great summary of kind of what we do with space, what space is, what we're doing up here in Saxavoro. What I do is in education and innovation. And I'll leave you with this link. If you have any questions, this will take you to where you can ask your questions. And then I think we have about 15, 20 minutes here that I'm happy to answer any questions. And want to thank all of you for joining in on this little journey and my little corner of the world. Yeah, thank you all so much. Yeah, so questions are coming in. Give it just a second here. And I'll read them off and happy to discuss anything. I mean, it's such a fascinating time to be in space, being involved with space, with all these private companies. One of the companies that I'm working with right now, Uplift Aerospace, Space Plus, is building the first web-based, Web3-based space program, which is really cool because it's bringing the arts community together with the digital community in order to give people opportunity to experience space. There's another program out there if you're really keen. It's until the 15th of November. It's called Citizen Astronaut, which is a program geared to give just anyone who wants to go to space an opportunity to become a community ambassador. It's all fully covered. You apply to it, and it's pretty much open. But if you want to look up some programs like that, there's a lot of new opportunities for you to go to space. It really doesn't cost anything. So sweet. Some questions coming in. How many rocket launches have you seen? I've only seen about 3 or 4 right now, but we will be on about a 30 rocket launches a year cadence up here once we're fully operational. But I was really lucky in the early 2000s to see a shuttle launch. I've seen a few SpaceX launches, and unfortunately, I was supposed to see Artemis launch back in August, September, but it was postponed. So so I haven't seen as many as I'd like, but you know what's really cool about seeing rocket launches is just feeling the rocket launch. You feel that power going up. So next question, can you see northern lights in space? You can. There's some really cool pictures from the International Space Station. If you just Google ISS northern lights, and you can see them dancing across the poles, which is really really fascinating. I've heard that thunderstorms and hurricanes are also just to see the magnitude of how big they actually are when you can map them and see it all in one. It's just awe-inspiring. Question, have you been to space or will you go to space? I have not been to space, but I am in the running in a candidate pool to go to space within the next 3 years. So I've already started some training. It's funny, my current training is online this month, but it takes place at 5 p.m. in California. So that means it's like 1 a.m. for me here. But that's what's great about the internet and being digitally connected is you can do some of these training opportunities remote until it's time to actually do some physical stuff. And I've got a 0G training coming up as well in the spring. So excited about that. And we're looking at sport in space. So my background also comes from sports. So we're thinking about how we can invent a sport that would work in space. And so we're going to be trying that out in a couple of zero-G rides in some of the parabolas. So that's where the aircraft goes up and then like nosedives for 10,000 feet. And then it's weightless and then you go back up and then you do that about 30 times. It's got some interesting nicknames because it makes you pretty sick if you're not careful. So question, what materials do you need to build a spaceship? Our Lady of Peace Primary School, they're looking for a shout out. Hey, Our Lady of Peace Primary School. Great that you tuned in today. So materials, so in the past, well, let's look at Starship. Starship is very interesting. That's Elon Musk's new big ship. It's a lot of steel, but you also have to think that the heavier materials you use, the more fuel you have to get up there. But then you're looking at, there's a lot of composite materials and ceramics. And like, I always love playing with the ceramic tiles from spaceships because usually they build them as tiles, stack them together. And then if one breaks off, you can change it out on a reusable ship. And then also they don't conduct heat as much, but it was really fascinating because I was able to walk around the Atlantis shuttle a couple months ago. And, you always hear about how they save weight in one place and other places. Well, when the shuttle's coming in for a landing, the nose and the underside and the wings and all that all have thick ceramic tiles that have multi-layers of foam and all that to block the heat and the friction. But when you look at the top side, it was all like space blankets and just like woven together materials and all that. And that was for weight, but that's because that never actually gets hot on that side of it. So it's really interesting to see the different materials that are utilized to basically shoot off. I mean, if like the Orion capsule that's going to go on the top of the Artemis launch, the SLS space launch system, a lot of that on the bottom side is your heat shield and all that, but it's composite materials, plastics, just things that will survive when you're in space and protect the astronauts from radiation. But you want to keep it as light as possible, but as rigid as possible. I've got a really good friend at Strathclyde University who is working with like the material that would go over the capsule as it's launched, which is kind of like a honeycombed web type of light steel. So it protects the capsule until it gets into space, that pops off, and then the capsule goes. So yeah, you got to look at different materials and densities and carbon fibers and all those kind of things. Let's see, how do they get from moon to, so how do they go from the moon to the Earth? Well, let's look at the Artemis mission, if you will, and they have launch windows that are ideal for where the position of all right, so you have, let's say the capsule here is Earth and then the moon is the moon. So as they're rotating around and we're going in our orbits and all that kind of stuff, you have to look at how the alignment of the moon is to where you're launching from the Earth, where the Earth is rotating. So it gave them launch windows. And so you want that alignment because what they end up doing is as you launch off, you're using gravity of the Earth to go around until it's a right angle. And then you do a burn. And as you do the burn, you need your object that you're heading to be in the right area. So as you're coming across the burn, you're coming around to it, but you can't just like go straight line. You have to think about where it's going to be in that rotation. So really you're coming off, you're coming down, and you're coming around. And then as this is coming around, you're meeting it, and then you're circling around using that gravity on the other side. And then whether it's the mission like Artemis 1 that's just going to go around a bunch of times and way out and all that, or if it's coming and then you do a burn so you can go in, and then you have to do the opposite coming back out. So for Artemis, they have launch windows of a couple of weeks, a month, and then it could be within like a 90-minute to 2-hour window during when they could launch in that to give the ideal positioning of both the Earth and the Moon. Outside of that, they wouldn't be aligned up. It'd take more fuel. They might completely miss it. A lot of different factors go in there. So that's kind of how, and it's about burn. And if you really want to play with some of that kind of physics and thought processes, I highly, highly recommend downloading Kerbal Space, Kerbel Space. It's a computer program that lets you build rockets and look at those kind of orbits and trajectories. And it's a lot of fun. Coincidentally, JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is like NASA's research group, actually rates, if you put on your CV that you can play in Kerbal, they actually give you like bonus points in the interview for that, because you do cover a lot of those kind of physics and trajectories and those paths and whatnot. So that's kind of it in a nutshell without getting too technical. But it's always fun to look at those. That's the same like when we finally go to Mars, you have to look at where Earth is and where Mars is, and you basically are shooting ahead of it. And when Elon and SpaceX launched their car into space a couple of years ago, the idea was to send the car to Mars, but they actually got their timing wrong and they ended up missing Mars. So the Astronaut is just hanging out somewhere in space with Elon's Tesla. But, you know, is what it is. But yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. Let's see. So I have a question. What does NASA mean? National Aeronautics and Space Administration. See, does it say on it? No. Yeah, so it's just National Aeronautics and Space Administration. It came out of the 50s, and you're looking at the space race between Russia and the United States and all the funding that went through that. And it was just kind of bringing it all together. Kind of like, so we have here the UKSA or UK Space Agency, governmental organization. Yeah. Yeah, National Space and Air Administration. When will your center be complete? So it is a work in progress. I can't give a definitive, but we're hoping to have launches sometime within early 2023. But it's going to be a work in progress. So we'll build out the pads because that's where you're launching. But then we're going to be building out more of the visitors center. We're going to have a performing arts center here because, again, like I said, arts is super important to what we do up here. And then have various other aspects of education and vertical farming. So the farming like hydroponic and all those kind of things. And various different aspects. So it's a work in progress, but we are on an old RAF base, which is the Saxavoro RAF base. So a lot of our facilities, like where I am right now is the old medical building. I live in some of the old officers accommodation and housing. So we do have some facilities here, but they are kind of old and we're going to build them up and whatnot. So yeah, it's a work in progress. What is your favorite thing about space? That's really funny because I just love the idea of space challenges our curiosity. And I had a question once of like, what's beyond the universe? And I was like, well, I was on a panel with an astrophysicist and a specialist in this sciences and all this kind of stuff. And I come from kind of social sciences originally. And I was like, it's your curiosity. That's what's beyond the galaxy. And so, yeah, it's how long is a piece of string, but it's that natural curiosity of the world is what I think is beyond, or natural curiosity of what is around us that's beyond the galaxy. That's one of the most fascinating things. Although I was doing a space-related scavenger hunt recently, and it took me to the rings of Saturn, and I didn't realize that the rings of Saturn also lined up with the notes in music. And so, coincidental or not, that's a whole nother place we could go. But when space and music and those things come together, I think it's so magical. And apparently, I heard that when Cassini was going around, they found out that the rings vibrate and have a vibrating noise to it, even though there's not really sound in space because of the vacuum. But whatever it is, it makes a vibration. So it'd be interesting to look at that resonance from a musical standpoint. And then the fact that we named the rings after kind of musical notes on like a treble clef or a bass clef. So that was kind of a fun thing to come across. And so, yeah, I guess a couple more, and I know we're running short on time. What skills do you need to become an astronaut? Right now, if you do the three things that I talked about, you do what you love with whom you love and help others, and be the best that you can be in that area. So you don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be in hard sciences. If you apply yourself to what you love to do and you try to become the best version of yourself that you can in that area, you can go to space with all these new programs that are coming up and commercial programs. Most of these new space companies that are outside of like NASA, ESA, JASA, cosmonauts and all that, all the private industry are looking for your artists, your creatives, your people who are thinking different about the world around you to then bring those stories back and share it with all of us. So honestly, when it comes down to skills, yeah, just be yourself, be genuine, and just work hard at what you do to be the best version of what you can be. And that's what's going to get you to space. The opportunity will be there. I wish I was 20 years younger, but it would be one of those 20 years younger, but with what I know. But still, I wish I had that opportunity. So I'm super jealous that all of you out there that are listening today are going to have these opportunities that we only could have dreamt of when I was your age. So how long can you stay in space? I think it honestly depends on what kind of materials you have to survive. So if you have enough oxygen, you have enough water, you have enough food, you could pretty much survive indefinitely. But remember, the longer you stay in space, the more atrophy your muscles have, the zero G. You start seeing some of these shows and books talking about really long people, but very no muscles. I mean, that's kind of that thing there too. But what I like to say about access to space is, let's say your legs don't work here on Earth. You don't need legs in space. So and a lot of moving around in spacecraft and on the International Space Station is all upper body. So in that sense, like, just because you might have an impairment or something on space, you might actually thrive, or on Earth, you might actually thrive in space. So don't think that any kind of limitations that you might have here on Earth might be a hindrance for future space. Like, even look at, if you want to look up Astro Access, great program. Some of my really good friends run it, and that's giving opportunities to anyone who wants to go to space, no matter where, what kind of opportunities or hindrances or anything that you might think of before. So yeah, check out Astro Access. They're a really cool resource. And then last question, do you believe in aliens? And this comes out from Long Ridge Primary. Hi, Long Ridge Primary from Shetland. I have to go off of the opinion that it's statistically improbable that we are alone. Now, what does that mean? And I think that goes back to the what's the equation? The Dirk equation? No, I know someone out there's yelling at me what the answer is. But anyway, it's looking at, there's certain factors here that, what does that other civilization or aliens or whatnot, are they microorganisms? But then you have to look at, can they connect? Are they able to communicate? Will their signal to us or their arrival to us be coinciding when we actually exist, because it takes so long to travel like light years between areas of the galaxy, of the universe? I mean, yeah, there could be, but do we exist at the same time and in the same dimensions as something else out there? Who knows? So my hope is yes, there are some sort of foreign aliens bodies out there, but would we be able to connect and interact, or do we live at the same period of time? Who knows? So anyway, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. Yeah, again, if you want to connect with me, my social media is @astra_doc. You can email me, mason.robbins@shetlandspacecenter.com. Happy to connect. And I really appreciate everyone, especially the Young STEM Leaders Week, for joining in, hearing a little bit more about what we do. And once we start launches, love to have all of you come up and visit. So thank you so much again for your time. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to speaking to you again.